While we wait for the 53-man roster to be completed in Kansas City, they got a number of guys back on the practice field, and I think most of Chiefs Kingdom can breathe a sigh of relief. We're going to tell you why and how today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. We are waiting patiently for the countdown to the roster. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. It's the daily fantasy made super easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less, depending on your projection, that is how you win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match with $100 with a promo code Locked On. I know you guys have heard that one before. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. We're going to go through the roster implications, maybe even a couple of pickups here later in the show. But the key is the Chiefs got back some of their strength today. We're going to go through the updates of who practiced yesterday on Sunday and what we're looking for this week. A lot to come. Thanks for making us your first listen. Check out the draft show for your next listen or one of the other billions of shows here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for free. We have a lot to get to. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics, NFL33.com, as well as RGRFootball.com.
And I'm Chris Clark, founder of Chiefs Corner. You can find me over there at Chiefs Corner. Going to be talking a lot about the games, but it's still 2 weeks away. So a little bit of time to figure out this roster. And there's a lot to talk about when players coming back. So,
yeah, I mean, hey, I think the offensive gurus, the fantasy fans out here in particular, are breathing a sigh of relief. The Chiefs have both their big acquisitions at the wide receiver spot back on the practice field for Sunday. MVS has cleared the concussion protocol, stated that today. Juju Smith-Schuster was at least back out there today. That's probably the top billing, right?
Yeah, for clarification, you mean Monday, not Sunday, but just throwing that out there because they did practice on Monday. The one guy that they're missing that is a little bit of a surprise to me is Leo Chanel.
Yeah, didn't see anything come up with him in that last preseason game, so who knows what that is. We should hear from Andy Reid on Tuesday about what some of the details are. But when you're looking at this offense, and this is definitely the biggest transition that this team has made in quite a while, and moving away from what is a top-down read to a kind of horizontal 5-wide receiver availability kind of thing, multiple weapons, I think there was a little concern out there about were they going to get back on the field? What was the seriousness of these injuries? Can they move forward if one or both of these guys wasn't able to go week one?
Yeah, there's a lot of concern. MVS and Juju not being able to go week one would be a huge problem, and you absolutely want them for week one, but you also are going to need them for week two, and that's a huge matchup that we are going to have to talk about at some point in the near future just because of the implications of how big that matchup itself is.
Yeah, we're going to have to start lumping in as we get past the roster designations and all that. Well, the Cardinals and Chargers are so tight. Was it 4 days difference? We're going to be talking about game planning for both as we go forward and as we get ready for them, as though it were 1 week probably, because we're not going to have a lot of time in between.
Yeah, no, we're not. And it's such a huge divisional game. There's going to be some build up to it. So maybe we talk about that a little bit later, maybe early next week, considering there's going to be a little bit of extra time since there's not going to be a game.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing that I really enjoyed about today's report, and obviously this is just a simple injury report, nothing official yet until Andy talks tomorrow on Tuesday, is that both Trent McDuffie and Rashad Fenton were back out at practice in some form. Now, we don't know the extent. Trent McDuffie went into the concussion protocol. It's unlikely, in my opinion, that he's already completed and gone out of it. MVS had like a 2-day start on him. So I do think that he's progressed to the point where I think it's step 4 or 5 where you can get back onto the field and do some light drills and that kind of thing before you even consider contact. But that's a really good progression and a very good sign for what the defense is going to have at the cornerback spot week one.
Yeah, both those guys being available would be a very huge boon for this Chiefs defense. So I'm looking forward to having those guys available and being able to play, especially when you're talking about going against an Arizona team that is going to be without DeAndre Hopkins. So that's going to be even more of a benefit for this team.
Yeah, you got to lock up and lock horns. And I think people have been expecting Rashad Fenton back. The groin appears to be well and healed, and he is back out there. And now you have your top 3. You have your top 2 wide receivers, and you have your top 3 corners all back in a day. where Legere was like kind of looking around like, hey, who's going to be playing with me here right now?
And you also have Carlos Dunlap back at practice as well. So that's something to watch as well.
Yeah, that's a big one because I would be concerned if Carlos continued to miss practice, if that Achilles had continued to flare up, that here in the next couple of days, as we see all these cuts come down, that they'd have to go out and make not what is like a developmental acquisition, but like somebody that they think can play right now. That gets expensive. Trey Flowers recently went off the market, so that limits your possibilities there as well. The guys that weren't out there, Frank Clark, you already mentioned Leo Chanel, Blake Bell and Matt Bushman both missed. Blake Bell, it is a hip adductor that's going to be, I think, problematic. I think we're going to see IR. We talked about that yesterday. If you missed our 53-man projection yesterday, go back and check that out. And Bushman with the clavicle. Another concern, both Deion Bush and Malik Herring didn't practice today. Don't have any designations on them or what might be bothering them either. So while there are more question marks, it is about, I think, guys in less precarious and less critical positions.
Well, Herring looks like it's an oblique from what I saw. So just want to throw that out there. And then at that point, but that becomes an even bigger issue because you talk about Dunlap missing practice, but he was back today, so that helps. So is Herring going to be the guy that they can keep? Are they thinking that's going to be a long-term injury? They're going to know the answer to that question. We don't know that. So it's going to be a question of whether or not they can figure that out and get that going forward. But Herring's a guy that both you and I had on the 53-man roster, and if he's not going to be available, that's a problem.
Yeah, it definitely is. And again, cut downs have begun. We're going to talk about some of the guys that are available now. Maybe there's an upgrade out there, not only that position, but several others. We'll get to those first. But I want to tell you about our newest friends and sponsors at PrizePicks, because you never know. In this first week, could Patrick go off for 300-plus yards? Could Josh Allen come in at that 274, which is just under the line that they're betting right now? There's a lot that goes into it. This is daily fantasy in a new scope. It's a lot of fun, and I personally really enjoy it because it's basically you make your under-over picks against their performance. It's not head-to-head. It's not against other players. It's very, very straightforward. And if you know the game and you know the matchups, you should be able to do this well. Pick 2 to 5 players who will either score more or less than the PrizePicks projection. That is on the PrizePicks site, so they set the line. You pick over/under. You can win up to 10 times your money on any one entry. No competing against other teams, other players, nothing. It's just you and the number. It's easy. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you can watch, not just the NFL, although we all know that that's the most important, but everything that you can imagine, from college sports, esports, NASCAR, something called cricket that I don't know anything about. Sorry, UK fans. You'll have to educate me. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's super fast, and the withdrawals are just as fast. It's currently available in 30 states and across Canada. All you got to do is go to the download at PrizePicks app at prizepicks.com and sign up today to play their daily fantasy sports. First-time users get 100% instant deposit match on $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. You know that code. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. You deposit $50, you get $50. Don't forget. Go to prizepicks.com and use that code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant up to $100 match. There's a lot. There's a lot going on. I know it's fantasy season. There's all kinds of stuff that's still coming. You never know what's going to be right around the corner, but we have it for you. The ultimate pro football preview is on right now. And thanks for making us your first lesson. Make that your second, because you need all the information you can get. The preview starts on August 31st. It's an 8-episode extravaganza that gives you everything that you need to be ready for the NFL season right now. The ultimate NFL preview. You can find it on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or anywhere that you get your apps or podcasts. Now, little trickles have started. The league is awake. I don't think it's quite rolling and doing business. We're not, the ovens are still warming up as far as before you slide the pies in there to melt the cheese. You got to get the ovens hot. But there's a couple of things that I found a little bit intriguing. Do you think that there's any one area that this roster needs to be bolstered specifically during cutdowns?
Man, I think there's several areas. Defensive end. I like Herring, but that's more of a project. That's not a known commodity. I think that if you could find a defensive end that would be a known commodity, I think that would be a direction you would go. Swing tackle we've talked about. Those are the two big ones for me. I think that you're looking at the rest of the roster, and I think you feel pretty good across the rest of the roster. But those are the two big ones that stand out to me.
Yeah, there's a lot. And the Chiefs don't need a backup quarterback, even though Jimmy Garoppolo looks like he's going to get a huge deal to be the guy that backs up Trey Lance and is his mentor. I believe it's going to be like a no trade and no tag clause so that you can see the end is near there. But it evidently didn't materialize. There was a trade today, though, and it does affect a couple of AFC teams. Laviska Shenault is leaving the Jacksonville Jaguars and our old friend Doug Peterson. That is kind of thing that I think right now is the reason the Chiefs are quiet, because you have to kind of hunt and peck this. They're sending Laviska Shenault from Jacksonville to the Carolina Panthers. And I think that's a win-win for everybody, to tell you the truth. It tells me a couple of things, though, that Doug is not super impressed with Laviska fitting into his system, or what would be the Reid system. It also tells me that the Carolina Panthers are desperate for talent because they need to help Baker Mayfield make the most of this one season. But that's the kind of thing that the Chiefs right now, that Brett Veach and Mike Borganzi are on the phone trying to sell. Listen, you need something. We got something. What will you give it to us for? Like 7th round pick, another player that maybe you're going to get rid of. I hope, and I know that they're making the calls. I hope that they're able to find something, because for me, I'd rather see them move Rojo, for instance, than just do a simple release. Get something back. It's at this tail end. This is when Inger for Travarius Ward a couple years ago worked out, and you saw Travarius play a lot of snaps for this league. Do you think that they're going to be able to get something like that done, or any trade done?
It's going to be hard. I think that you're going to have to look at premium positions to try to make those types of moves. And running back, I'm sorry, just isn't one of them. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that they're able to get something for Rojo. I just don't see how that's going to happen unless somebody thinks that he can come in and be basically their starter, because that's really what you're going to be looking to try to replace. So that'll be interesting to watch, see if they can get anything from him. Then you start having to wondering, okay, can they get anything from their corner depth? Can they go and trade something for a guy like Boodle? Can they go trade something for a guy like Lamons? We both talked about guys that we think they're going to make the roster, and we're on the different ends on that one, and that's fine. But can they get anything for the guy that they're not going to keep? Yeah. Or can they get something for a guy that they want to keep necessarily, but they have somebody that they like just about as well? That's the key.
That is the key. And it's about value. It's got to go both ways. Like, nobody gets a free deal this time of year. So you got to present it in a way that like pumps up a guy. And that's honestly why you give Rojo that many carries last week. And you're right, it's not a premier position, but it's something that you might have to look at. There's also a couple of things that you could do. I mean, we all know that there's been this battle, and Isaiah Pacheco has emerged at the position. But I mean, there's an interesting move today that I don't know if you're a huge Sony Michel fan or not, but he's out there on the street as of now. Like,
I saw that.
Is that somebody you think that they could go bring in to try to be what Rojo wasn't, and be another viable veteran that can give you a little bit of spark from now and then?
Maybe, but where are you going to make the move elsewhere? I mean, obviously, you could possibly do that. I think Sony Michel is going to want a place where he can go and start, or at least compete for starting, and I don't think he'd be given that here.
Oh, agreed. I don't know if he's going to get that
anywhere. And to be fair, I'm not so sure he deserves to be given that here. I'm not saying that Clyde is great or that he's been great, but between Clyde and Pacheco and McKinnon, I think you have something there that I don't know that you would want to add that into the mix. I mean, could he come in and be a change of pace back and be a bruiser, or be a guy that gets you short yardage stuff? Yeah, he could do that kind of stuff. But
I actually see him as insurance for a McKinnon injury myself.
Well, and maybe he could do that too. But I guess what my point is that you already have two guys that you feel like maybe could be starters, because I think that the Chiefs still feel like CEH can be a starter. And I'm thinking that they're starting to view Pacheco as a potential starter down the road. So do you really want to go take away carries from those two guys?
No, it's probably not ideal, but you got to consider everything. It's a long road to get to where this 53 is going to be, and there's a lot of options. There's one veteran and two young guys that I want to talk about that hopefully can get back to that, and maybe we'll see what the future holds for them.
Are you one of the people who thinks it's okay to drive stoned? What's the worst that can happen? You end up driving below the speed limit? It's no big deal, right? Wrong. The truth is your reaction times slow way down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but everyone around you. Talk about a buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high and get a DUI.
Okay. So the road is narrow and twisting in the whole 9 yards. There is one release. Right. I mean, you got to keep it interesting, right? I mean, hey, anybody can fall asleep. My question is, there's one release in particular that kind of stands out to me. Jared Davis is available, or he's going to be very soon. I haven't seen the official notice come down, but it looks like the Lions are waiving the former first rounder. My question to you, is he better than Elijah Lee? Can he supplement and be better than, say, Jermaine Carter was if they are considering keeping 6? Is that something worth going and pursuing Jared Davis?
I think it's worth pursuing, but not for Elijah Lee.
Okay.
And my thought process on that is, I think you don't want it to, after not seeing him all camp, and yeah, you can go watch game film, you can go try to get an idea there, but I wouldn't want to cut Elijah Lee and then bring in Jared Davis and think, oh, well, what did I do?
Yeah, I wouldn't consider them the same player either.
No, and I get that, but I'm just saying I wouldn't want to do that. So if I was going to make that move, I think you would have to say, okay, is Jared Davis better than Darius Harris? And you're going to have to cut Harris. That's a move that would be difficult to do, but I think that they would have to consider it.
Yeah.
Because
Possibly.
then you could bring in Davis and you could have him sit here and learn the defense for the next couple of weeks and maybe challenge Elijah Lee down the road. Harris is probably going to be a guy that they could maybe get on the practice squad and they could bring up if they need him.
Possibly, yeah. I look at what they did in the preseason with Harris, though, and there were a couple of times where he did the Mike Backer Tampa 2 drop, like straight down the hashes and that kind of thing. I don't think Jared Davis is capable of that. So I'm not sure what they see or how they want to plug guys in, but I think it's worth kicking the tires. I mean, anytime you can upgrade, even if it is the 50th guy or the 48th guy on the roster, you're still upgrading the floor of this roster. And I think that serves well. There's two other guys. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to say really quick, the only other thing in that is I'm okay with making the move. I'm not saying you can't. What I am saying is, where are you going to get the roster spot? Because you're going to have to get it from somewhere. And I agree with you. Darius Harris, I think, showed promise and showed things that I didn't expect him to be able to show. So I hate going that direction. I just don't know that you could move Lee to bring in Davis without knowing what you really have in Davis. So to me, it's either get rid of Darius Harris, which I don't like that scenario, or you keep 6 linebackers and you've got to find another position somewhere else where you're going to go shorter.
Okay. Quick reaction. 2 young guys. It does appear that Tevin Jenkins is on the block and can be had in a trade. Is it worth pursuing right now? And how much do you give for him?
I'd trade for him. And I don't know what Chicago would be able to get for him because they don't want him. So, and people are going to expect that he's going to be a guy that's going to get cut. So I don't think that they're going to be able to get a lot. To me, I give him, I'd probably, I don't know, former first-round pick. How strongly do you feel about him? I don't have that much of a strength in it. So maybe a 5th or a 6th-round pick. But if the team feels good about it, I'm not going to be upset about a 4th. I honestly wouldn't even be upset about a conditional 3rd. If he's a guy that can step in and start at right tackle for you for years, if that's what they believe that he can be, if he develops, then a conditional 3rd is worth it.
It is about the initial evaluation. And knowing that Ryan Poles came from Kansas City, I have to think his acceptability of letting him go means that I doubt the Chiefs had him very high either. So I'm with you on a day 3 level pick. I won't touch a top 100 for him. But if it comes down to it, especially if he's a free agent, I think you got to kick the tires no matter what. And that brings me
I mean, if it comes down to it, giving him a conditional, say it's a 4th or a 5th normally, but if he plays a certain percentage of snaps, like 50% or 60%, then it's a conditional 3rd. I'd be okay with that because at that point, you're only figuring it's going to be a 5th. And if he ends up having to play, then you're covered.
Yeah, that's fair. And, it's a twist this season. The last couple seasons really on just how deep a roster is because of the new rules for calling guys up from the practice squad. So there's 2 practice squatters I want your opinion on. 2 guys that I liked coming out of college, and they haven't worked out with their first team. Stephen Parker, the safety from Oklahoma, has been released today as well. And he's not a guy that's going to push Brian Cook or even Deion Bush. But I do think he's better than Devin Key, and I do think he gives Zane somebody to compete against, somebody that could possibly play special teams. Would you look at making an acquisition like that? Should be super cheap on the practice squad.
I would. I think they kept 2 safeties all last year for the most part. So it's not outlandish for them to have 2 safeties on the practice squad. So to me, I would go and make a move if they think that he can be better than Zane Anderson, which is their 5th guy right now. Then sure, go do it and see if he can develop and to be something better than Deion Bush, because I think you're set at the safety position other than Deion Bush for the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair. And I don't do this very often, but I'm going to implore all of our audience, whether it be on YouTube, make sure you like, sub, and hit the bell, or whether on our classic audio feeds. If you have a Twitter account, go to Ryan Tracy NFL and retweet my tweet for the Chiefs practice squad. I even added the Chiefs because I want Brett Veach to see this. My Mighty Mouse candidate is available. He's the same size as Tyreek Hill. Nowhere near as fast, but he's crafty and he works hard. And I love this kid and his moxie. I want Jared Stearns on the Chiefs practice squad. I'm willing to give up a hamburger to do it, and I hope that Brett Veach will as well.
Andy might say it has to be a cheeseburger. The funny thing is I knew you were going to say Jared Stearns before we even started this conversation. So I've been waiting for this. I was figuring it was going to be the first guy you mentioned for the practice squad. I wouldn't mind the move. At this point, it's one of those things where you start looking at who can develop and who can be a guy for you later. And if he can be a guy that they think can develop, then great. Go bring him on the practice squad, see if he has something that you like. And if he's able to stay around, then great. If he's not, there's no harm done. You're going to have 16 guys on the practice squad regardless. You're going to be paying the same amount of money regardless. And really, it's not a Stearns comment near as much as it is just around the league in general. If you believe you have a guy that could contribute, go bring him in, pay the money, see if he's worth it for a couple of weeks. And if he's not, then you release him and you go find somebody else. I mean, that's how they get some of these guys on the roster for so long. Look at what they did with Jody Fortson. Mm-hmm. And he still hasn't contributed to the extent that you and I both think he's going to this season.
True.
And some people are doubters, and that's fine. Be a doubter. But I guess my point is you can develop guys on the practice squad. You just have to be smart about it. Exactly. So the question I would have for you is, would you give up Ely on the practice squad for Stearns?
Well, 1-for-1 trade? Right now I would, because I think Jared Stearns has the ability to be better than Albert Wilson in a similar path that Albert took in having to develop and having to make the rosters. Ely I like, and I love his potential, but I didn't see anything this preseason. So,
right, but he didn't play much this preseason. So I wonder how much that was specifically done.
That's a good point. I will just say this: I'd like them both. Thank you.
Yeah, I knew you. Well, see, that's why I didn't give you the option, because I knew you would like them both. My point is and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the team doesn't like Ely. That's why I didn't get playing time. But it's really interesting when you start looking at guys that don't get playing time and wondering, okay, well, why didn't they get it at all? Are you trying to make sure that they don't go anywhere and they can come back on the practice squad? Because you're right, Ely got almost no playing time. He was on special teams. He had a couple of returns. That's about it.
Yeah. I'd be willing to take a risk, but I would like to see them both there.
And it's a position change, right? Because he was a running back in college. So
he's a bit of both. He's a dat guy, in my opinion. So let's see if they can find a role in one position or the other, or maybe you just got to hybridize it. We'll see what happens. But,
yeah.
Folks, if you've made it this far, thanks for making us your first listen. Make sure your second one, I got another option for you, because the intellectual fantasy expert, Vinny Iyer, brings you all of his 20 years of fantasy expertise every day on the Locked On Fantasy Football Show. So make sure you go check that out as well. Now, cuts are coming tomorrow. We will have reaction if there is anything earth-shattering, if the Chiefs, trade for Josh Allen, the pass rusher. We'll definitely drop something for you tomorrow, but we will run down what we know for the roster itself once we have the cuts in.
I have to ask this really quick, because I'm sure somebody's going to say something on our feed. Thoughts on Patrick Mahomes being number 8 in the top 100?
That's a whole other show. And I think we have to talk about the implications of that, because I personally love it. I hope that it continues.
Oh, I do too. I was giddy when I saw it. I was so happy. I was like, oh God.
Right. And it takes longer to count on 8 fingers than it does on 4, but he'll get there.
But Mahomes is, and I say this in the best possible sense, he is so petty at times, and this is just going to be great.
Petty is good. I like it.
Yeah, and Stroop already tweeted it out. I love that too.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Hey.
Yeah.
It's like it's a chorus. It'll get there, and let's see what Patrick does with it. We got a little bit of time, but I'm guessing the Cardinals are going to face the brunt of that. Let's see what happens. Folks, thanks for making us all your time and all your first listens today, as well as all the other shows that you're going to hear on the Locked On Podcast Network. We appreciate it, and we do have a lot coming, so stay with us. We are here 5 days a week. If you just found us, I'm Ryan. He's Chris. This is the show every day for you. Make sure you get subbed on YouTube as well as the audio platforms. Thanks for spending this time with us. We'll talk to you tomorrow.